the other important story on fault lines this week? Well, imagine buying the most advanced fighter jet on Earth, but still needing someone else's password to unlock parts of it. That's the debate now that's circling around F-35, a growing controversy over whether allies can truly jailbreak the jet's digital backbone. We'll unpack what's happened so far and the conditions the US places on nations trying its most advanced aircraft. But first up, take a look at this report that tells you exactly what the controversy is all about.
If you think of the F-35 Lightning II as just another fighter jet, you're way off track. It's a flying computer, a stealth aircraft wrapped around millions of lines of code. Every mission it flies, every radar sweep, every target track, every system check, they all run through software built and managed by its manufacturer, Lockheed Martin. Now that's where the controversy begins. Think of it like this. You buy the car, but the company keeps control of the operating system. Updates, they approve them. Repairs, they certify them. Major modifications, you ask first. Now scale that to a $100 million stealth fighter. There's no confirmed kill switch, no public evidence of a secret off button. But critics say that the structure itself creates dependency. Mission data files are centrally managed. Core software updates come from the US. Deep system access isn't fully open to partner nations. So the question being asked in defense circles is simple. In a crisis, how independent is independent? That debate has grown louder as countries re-examine their fighter fleets. Different aircraft, different philosophies. The F-35 offers unmatched stealth and sensor fusion. Think of it as a battlefield quarterback in the sky. But as warfare becomes more digital, sovereignty seems to lie with the one who holds the master key.
Professor Scott Lucas joins me to talk more about whether this is realistically possible, the larger implications of this in terms of the trust deficit between the US and its NATO allies. Professor Scott Lucas, let me start by asking you just that, whether this is realistically possible or not.
Let's assume, however, that the Europeans could, in effect, take over the code and continue to operate the F-35s if the U.S. threatened not to provide software updates. Well, you would have a legal case, which takes precedence. Would it be the U.S. requirement that any operation of its F-35s be in accordance with its standards and guidelines? Or would the Europeans be able to argue that there was a threat of imminent risk because the U.S. was no longer cooperating over the F-35s? And then politically, what would be the repercussions for the Europeans if they did this? But I think I have to tell you that there would already, if this situation ever arose, we would already be at a point of a serious US-European breakdown, because what you're saying is that US politicians are not allowing their European allies to operate essential warplanes. That, in other words, they are blackmailing Europe by saying, you do what we want, or you can no longer operate the F-35s. Now, certainly the Trump camp have brought us to the point of a serious break with Europe by effectively abandoning the alliance. But I still don't think we're at the point where US military officials are going to hold the Europeans to ransom over the F-35s. So I still think that this question of Europe taking over the code of the F-35s is a hypothetical rather than a real situation.
And do you see any of that actually impacting the larger US-EU ties, particularly in the backdrop of growing trust deficit, in the backdrop of a need and a clamor within the European governments to increase defense spending?
We're already in the midst of unprecedented European discussions, at least since 1945. And that is because of the Trump camp's threats and its possible refusal of cooperation. Europe is now having to talk about being self-sufficient, or at least not reliant on the United States for defense capabilities. So we're already in the midst of a European quest announced by the European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen for 800 billion euros in defense investment and production over the next 5 years. We're already in the midst of countries such as France and Germany discussing unprecedented levels of military cooperation, including over the French nuclear arsenal. That's how far this has gone. Now, in the specific case raised by the State Secretary of the Dutch Defense Ministry, Mr. Tuinman, what you have is, I think, an issue that Europe has to consider its jet fighter capability. If you really do not have a U.S. which can be trusted anymore, where do you go where you don't have to rely on the F-35, which is still probably the world's most advanced jet fighter? Is there a European equivalent that can be developed or upgraded in the near future?
All right, we leave it there. Professor Lucas, thanks much for speaking to me on Fault Lines.